If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hey guys, my name is Jay, and welcome to the podcast Peer2Peer Journeys. On this podcast, I'll be interviewing folks from all walks of life, and we'll be discussing their stories and experiences dealing with mental health. It is my hope that sharing these stories will help others struggling in silence. And today's wonderful guest we have is Kay.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well, doing very well.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. You want to just dive right on in? I already have some questions.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
All right. So my first question for you is, what mental health issues or problems do you struggle with?
I've dealt with anxiety since I was about 14 years old and depression since I was about 16, 17. The anxiety spanned from a very long time of bullying, like ever since, well, in my UK world, it'd be primary school, and then through high school, it was every day and it was relentless. So I just kind of grew really bad feelings towards myself. I'd hate the idea of going outside anywhere. I would always hide behind my mum when we were going out. Like, it was loads of little things, but then it just got bigger and worse and worse.
Yeah, so it sounds like it built up over time for you, would you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It kind of started off with me just going, I don't want to go to school, but not because I didn't like school. I mean, I loved learning and I still do, but it was just the people, my fellow peers, I should say, just I was getting bullied every day and it was getting worse and worse. Like, at primary school, it was just silly little taunts, but I'm also dyspraxic, I'll add, as well. So I have a lot of like cognitive problems. I'm very, very slightly on the autistic spectrum. So I react to things a lot more sensitively and I act a bit differently to other people. So my defense mechanism has always been to cry, and that's the reason why I've been bullied so much, is because, I was a crybaby. I was everything of the above. And when I went to high school, I would jump at everything because that's my sensory overloads and things going mad. And it would get to a point where people would just constantly be shouting and screaming in my ear all the time, and that would just be worse and worse. And then they'd say nasty things, and yeah, it's a lot. I could say some of the things that they've said, but honestly, it's just, there's so much that happened.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like you dealt with a lot of adversity too, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Again, with the bullying, it was very much, even like, I'm talking rugby players, these massive fucking rugby players would push me down in the corridors, like literally push me to the floor and be really nasty and vile. And it's like, are you supposed to be a man? Aren't you supposed to, like, lead your team and be a good example? It annoyed me because when I left school due to the bullying, to find out that these people were prefects, like they're supposed to be the main people of our school. Like, no, why? But as soon as I left school, went to college, things were a lot better. I started to like see myself a lot better. I think all the people that were at college kind of wanted the same thing. We all wanted to be treated as adults. So we were all in that same bubble. But then when I thought I was completely over it, I just started to feel low. And for no real reason, I just felt low. And then the low kind of felt like I was worthless and I wasn't enough. And it would just keep going and going. And it would just go into this continuous spiral. And it just get to the point where I thought, I don't want to be here anymore. And I had suicidal thoughts and things before, back when the bullying happened. I remember it must have been about 15 or something. I literally walked out of school. I've never done that before. But I just got so much and I walked out of school and I called my mum, but she decided to hang up. And she knew I had these issues. but she kept trying to call me, but I was ignoring her.
Mm.
And I remember I was lying on the floor, lying next to a massive knife. I don't know what was going on in my head. I kind of wanted to use it, but in my head, I didn't want to hurt myself, if that makes sense. Like, I have self-harmed, and I admit that. But it's kind of like in my head, it's always been, I know it's going to hurt, so I don't want to do it. But at the same time, it's like you have that drive that you really want to do it. So it's kind of more like your brain telling you to do it more than yourself saying it's going to hurt. And I've always, whenever I have done it, it's never been so deep, but it's still been self-harm. So yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, especially in this day and age. I know that over here in the States, United States, self-harm is quite common among young people. And it's been kind of like the last few years, like the go-to for people that have, that are dealing with a lot. So how did you, are you still self-harming, or is that, something that you're coping with better?
In a few days' time, I'll be 6 months clean.
Hey, good job.
I know. The last time I did it, it's crazy because I'm 22 now, and I didn't think I'd be back in this situation. But I was doing night shift at a care home that I work at. I work with elderly people with dementia. So that job's already strenuous enough, but I was doing night shift and I wasn't sleeping or eating right, but that's part of the job. But I was with this woman who I had to work with all the time, who was a nurse. And she was just so nasty to me. And this woman, I'm talking like in her 40s, and she was this horrible, nasty, vindictive woman. She would just continue to be so nasty and vile. And I reported her. But she went up and apologized to me. So, I'm a really forgiving person. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. But I thought the complaint would still go through because what she said, some of the stuff she said to me was completely vile. Like it made me unwell. And honestly, like I would be having panic attacks in the bathroom. I'd just not be wanting to go to work, even though I love my job. I love helping other people, but I just hated the idea of working with her. And all of my shifts were like same day working with her. And I told the manager, but the manager and her were like best friends.
Oh, it's one of
like
those.
Unprofessional friendship. And I'm just like, what's even the point in this? And I remember the last day I was on, before I put in a sick line and said, no, if I do this, I will probably do something stupid. And I did do something stupid. I was sitting in, I was sat, and this was actually a shift that I wasn't on with her, but I had all this stuff going on in my head that I took my work keys and I just went to town on my arm. And again, not deep, but it was still continuous on my arm. Yeah, and again, I called Samaritans, and I think the talking did help, but at the same time, it was like in my head, because I was so messed up, I was like, nobody's listening to me, nobody understands me, nobody's gonna get it. And so I just said, I need to go to work. So I went along having done this, and I just had to get on with the shift. But by this point, I was just like, if I stay here, I'm not going to be here anymore. And that shouldn't be right for anybody. Nobody should have to deal with that in the workplace.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I think, especially with the pandemic going on, a lot of people are feeling very pressured to stay at jobs that, are detrimental to their mental health and, end up hurting them in the long haul. So how do you deal with that? Like, do you have any strategies or anything that,
well,
helps you with it?
I mean, work anyways, like even before the pandemic, it's quite stressful anyway, because we're literally looking after people, and these people have dementia, so they could hit out at us or they could shout at us and do all sorts, but we kind of you have to keep going on with it, otherwise it's going to be, you're just going to take everything personally and it won't be good. You kind of just have to find the funny in it. Like, I'm not saying dementia's funny, it's absolutely not in the slightest, but it's like some of the stories you're kind of like, oh yeah, and you're kind of thinking that makes no sense, but it's kind of like, oh, it's kind of humorous because some of the things are just like, oh, okay, that's fine. But so you kind of have to find the joy in it. And, you know, I think with the pandemic as well, we're all kind of in the same boat and we have to kind of lift each other up. And we have been doing, I think I've only been at this job literally 2 weeks after that sick line, or during that sick line, I was off for 2 weeks. And the day I came back was the day I started at this new job. It was just a transfer because it was the same company, but just a completely different care home. And from the moment I walked in, it was like a complete change because everybody was so nice to me. Everyone would tell me what a good job I was doing, what a good carer I was, that I'm really nice and pleasant with the residents. And I never had that at my other place. And I've been there, at that point, I'd been there for 4 years. Whereas I'm literally just in the door of this place and I'm getting 10 times more respect than I ever would. And I always say, and this has always been my thing, always treat others with respect, or the way that you'd want to be treated. That's how you should treat people. So yeah, and the one thing that's bad about my job just now is that because everything has to be like super uber clean with like germs and the pandemic and COVID and shit flying about the place, we have to just keep clean and constant. But I think what people, especially the care inspectorate, I think what they're forgetting is that this is a home. This is where somebody lives. We can't be constantly cleaning every single surface every 2 seconds. We have to be looking after these frail old people. Like, they're throwing out all these living room chairs. These are like elderly people. And they're like, oh, right, there's only like 2 chairs in your lounge now. And we have like 20 people living in a house.
Oh boy.
Like, where are we gonna sit? And it's like, oh, I couldn't take this person to the toilet because I was too busy cleaning this area for the past hour, like you asked me to do. So it's like, where's it in my contract that I have to look after these? Well, I have to look after these people. That's in my contract. It's not in my contract to clean a friggin' table every 2 seconds. And I understand why we have to do it, but there's just some things that are asking us to do, and I'm like, this is not part of what I do. And
so definitely, it sounds like that's very frustrating, having to take on work that you were never assigned to in the first place, right?
Yeah, I think the only reason that we're coping with this is because we're all coping together, and it's kind of like we're just taking each other, we're just screaming outside the work and just getting on with it. We're kind of thinking as soon as the care inspectorate go, it's kind of going to settle, but I don't know. I mean, but I think in my life it's kind of grown with don't let these minor adversities stop you, because if you do, that's it. Like, you're just going to get yourself in this whirlpool of thoughts and negativity. So I'm kind of like, everybody's getting uber stressed, and I'm just like, if it happens, it happens. You know, like, I do care, but it's very much, I care too much to not get myself unwell again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can have compassion, but also too, like, there's still like a hard line that needs to be had, especially with highly empathetic people, such as yourself, that go out of their way to care for others. You have to take care of yourself. So I guess also too, in light of all this going on, how's your mental health doing during the pandemic? Like, I know a lot of people are struggling with all sorts of stuff, and then some people that never had mental health problems, they're suddenly welcome to it. So how are you coping with it?
Well, for me, because of the job that I do, nothing really changed. It was just because obviously we can't take furlough or time off because this is a care home. We have to look after people regardless. So we're just wearing our masks and things and PPE and stuff, and it's not much different. So nothing really changed for us, but I was very aware of what was going on for other people. Mm-hmm. Like my mum, and she was treated poorly at her job as well. And she was on furlough for ages. But the bad thing about her job was that they never told her anything. Like, they never gave her any updates or anything like that. And I imagine people are in the same boat with that. And she was really panicked and stressed and fed up. And, I think I was getting not upset, but I was just getting really worried about her. Mm-hmm. And, it's my mom. I don't want her to go through what I've went through. And
of course.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have struggled And I think the one time that I really struggled with COVID especially was, it's just, you see what it does to people. Like some of the residents that we've had COVID and in the end died of COVID. They could have been so healthy, have nothing wrong with them. And then as soon as it hits, that's it. They've just gone completely downhill, and it's heartbreaking. Like in the whole 4+ years I've been doing care, I never walked into somebody who'd just died. Like I've never found somebody, but this year I have, or last year I have. And oh, it's horrible. Like I think I walked into this person as they just died because they were still warm, and it's horrible. And I admit, when I came home, I was fine, but it was the next day. I was a half shift, so I finished like 2:30 in the afternoon, and I walked home, and all of a sudden had this feeling of nothing, and I just sat in the middle of my living room floor. I don't know why the floor, don't ask me why. And I was just staring at the wall blankly. That I had no feeling, no emotion, no nothing. I just felt empty. And like feelings of sadness and anger is awful, but I can't explain what the feeling of emptiness is like, where you have absolutely no emotion. It's just, it's weird. It's quite frightening, because you're like, if you're explaining it to somebody, you're like, well, I don't feel sad and I don't feel angry. I definitely don't feel happy. I just feel nothing. But then again, you have that thought, if I feel nothing, I am nothing. The world is nothing. And then you're going into this existential, you know what I mean? You're having this crisis to yourself. But I did have this thought in the back of my head that this is going to happen with the pandemic. It's just going to happen. And even with me as a carer, it's just going to happen in my job, and I've got to understand that. You know, it's a really, really hard job, and I think our profession especially needs to be more respected. Because I don't know if you saw this thing going around on Twitter, but there was this guy, and he was like, oh, these mask selfies are so next old wave or whatever. And it was like, the NHS has had a 1% pay rise. 1%. These people are saving lives, and there is nothing being done. Like it's disgusting. We get paid peanuts for what we do.
Yeah,
I would not change my job for the world. Absolutely not. But it just sucks. I think more people need to understand what we do, and that we can only do the best that we can do.
Yeah, I guess my heart goes out to you guys, especially, all caregivers across all different fields during the pandemic, because I mean, especially at this point in the game with it, I feel like there was like a small wave of appreciation, but then as soon as people got their creature comforts, as I like to call it, it just went down again.
Yeah.
And I know that can be very frustrating too. And also too, I did hear about that 1% deal with you guys.
Yeah.
And it's insane. And I'm just thinking, like, a question I have that goes for you, but also for caregivers as a whole, like, how would you rate the mental health of a caregiver right now? Like, what have you seen in your coworkers and associates?
It's all stress. I think we're all so tired. We're all just mentally drained, and it's not even just because of the job that we do. I think it's the way that we've been treated.
Mm-hmm.
Not only by, I think there's the public opinion of us has gone down. I think it's just because everyone's stressing out about this, and they think, that it's partly us to do with COVID going into the homes and things. And it's like, well, it'll come in by anything. We don't know what's bringing it in. But even if it was one of us, it would be a complete accident. Nobody would mean for it to happen. But everyone's just stressing out, and it's horrible. And a lot of people have left work because of it. People have been taking mental health leave, and luckily I've not been there yet. I'm still. It's funny because I always use work as a distraction from how I'm feeling, and it normally is a good distraction because you're just keeping yourself busy. But at the same time, you just get to a point where you're just like, this is too much. I do need that time to myself. But then at the same time, I also recommend to those who aren't feeling well to just try and push yourself to go to work, and you'll have that, that busyness, and you'll keep going and you'll have your mind off it. And it'll probably suck when you get back home, but I don't know. I don't know what the best thing to do for you is, but other than try and speak to somebody about how you're feeling.
Have you? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I don't even know what I was going to say.
It's all good. I was going to ask, have you had to take mental health breaks or anything like that, or have you had the opportunity to, get time to yourself with everything going on?
Not this time. I think I've always been a person who's had the attitude that the only time I'm going to be off work is if my head's falling off. Like, I'll still go into work if I'm like dying. I will still go in and do my work. But it got to the point in my last place, so this is like 4 years I've been working there. It was when I started night shift when I had to take mental health leave, and this wasn't just the last time before I left. I had to do it before as well, because I'd just been having constant panic attacks, anxiety attacks, super depressed. And with my self-harm as well, it started off with like just snipping my skin and scratching, and then it kind of got on to like the keys and things, and it wasn't nice. But in terms of where I am now, I've never really had anything bad. There has been times where I've really thought about taking some time off, but I think in the back of my head as well is that I can't think of anything worse than being short-staffed in the place that we work. It's hard enough being fully staffed. Having like one person off or two or how many, it's awful. Like, I can't tell you how many times, especially recently, I've been working with, say we've meant to have 4 carers on the floor. There's only been like 2 for 20 people. It's hard. It's friggin' hard. So whenever they're like, who wants to pick up an extra shift, I'm always like, I'm really tired, but I'll do it. Because I know what it's like. And sometimes it does suck when other people are like, when they're going, who wants to pick up a shift, and nobody says it. And I'm just like, I would, but I've just worked like the last 5, so I really don't want to.
Yeah, it's like, can somebody else take one for the team? I've already done it like a billion times already.
I know. Like this week, I managed to get, I was meant to work Friday for 13 hours, but I managed to just get a half shift because I picked up on it was one of the other days I was supposed to be a half shift as well, which was an extra shift. But because somebody didn't turn up, and if this agency care didn't come on, it would have just been the nurse that was on shift. No cares. And I'm like, this is shitty. So I had to stay on for that whole 13 hours and have an agency on the back shift and an agency cares, like somebody who's come in from like wherever, who's not used to like our home. It could be, they go everywhere. So and this is an agency that's never been to our home before. So I had to like show him about, and I'm like, I'm still pretty new to this home, so I can't really do everything perfectly, but I'll show you what I can. But you just have to kind of keep going, and we got there in the end, and that's my attitude. We got there, it's fine.
Yeah, I dig it.
Nice to pick it up.
That's better than how a lot of people are taking stuff like this. So you're like way ahead of the game, I would say.
I think that's, again, with my own recovery, I think when I'm one of those people that bottles up all of my emotions, I am so bad for it. I always bottle until the point I just completely break. But I think the last time I took myself to the doctor, I basically have to force myself because I was walking home from work. This is when I was working at my old place. I was walking home, and I remember it's almost like I was physically stopped, but it was like because of my own emotions, and I could just see it's a flash of light, and I just saw myself in this weird vision cutting my wrist. And it was very graphic. It was very vivid. It's almost as if I could actually feel it happening. And I'm talking, this is only like 10 seconds or something, but when I came out of it, it was almost like I was really dizzy, like I felt like I was going to collapse. But because it felt so real, I could not stop crying. I was just in this complete wave. And I mean, I hadn't been feeling well mentally, but again, I hadn't told anybody. Like, I'm very open with my mum and things. And I told her that I've not been right, but I've never told her to what extent. Like, that I had been feeling quite low, quite not so suicidal, but just like I probably could have been, like maybe on the verge. But when I was walking, I got on my bus. I was sobbing the whole way on the bus, and I got off. But where I got off, it was like a block of shops. But if I went left, I'd be going home to possibly do what my vision was telling me to do. Or if I went right, I'd be going to the doctor to help myself. And in my whole life, it's like a metaphor of my life. My whole life be going left, just to God knows what. To God knows where my mind was going to take me. But I thought, you know what, fuck this. I've spent so much time getting messed over by my mind. And I remember I marched myself to that doctor, something I would never dream of doing. Like, I don't know what came over me. I just did it. And I remember telling the receptionist, look, I don't have an appointment, but if I'm not seen to today, I won't be here tomorrow. Oh,
you okay?
And they were, yeah, absolutely. Just looking back on that, I'm like, damn. And they're like, well, you're supposed to have an appointment. And I was like, are you kidding me? Did you just hear what I said? So they're like, just wait there. We'll get somebody to see you. I'm like, right, okay, no problem. And I was sitting there, and I remember I texted my mum and I said, listen, don't freak out, but I'm at the doctor's. And I'm shaking and sobbing. And literally, it was minutes my mum was in there with me. And I can't tell you how much I was shaking like that day. I was like, oh, I was trembling like you wouldn't believe. Oh God, my camera. And the thing is, this is like another weird piece of irony. But I remember, everyone knows how I feel about Troy Baker, and I'm gonna keep saying this like forever. But I had a post-it note from him that I got at a con. And I asked him to write me something motivational to get me through my mental health. So he just wrote on this little pink post-it, you are enough. And I've always held it in my pocket. Every single day I held it in my pocket. And I swore to myself that I would never lose it. And the one day I was at that doctor's, I didn't have it in my pocket.
Oh no.
So it was like, I don't know, it was just like this one little piece of me. It wasn't there. So I marched myself to a tattoo place like a couple of days later. So I told myself I'd never lose it again. So it's now on my wrist where I saw myself cutting myself.
That must have been very empowering for you to get that.
Yeah. I remember looking at it after, and I just cried. And as well with where I cut myself with my keys, I got the Joel moth from The Last of Us, because I'm just saying, read my blog about Joel if you don't know how I feel about him.
It's good stuff. There's a
lot of emotion. Oh, thank you. But yeah, my main advice to anybody who's like me, a bit of a bottler, even if you write your feelings down, I feel like that's a good thing. If you're just completely offloading onto a bit of paper rather than just saying to somebody, I feel like even that helps a little bit. But don't always keep it to yourself, even if you're writing it down. Just tell somebody. Or just do something that kind of gets it out somewhat. Like, I'm one of those people that would like write down my feelings, or I'd write a story, or I'd do something like just to express the way I'm feeling, and it would help. And another way I help myself, and this is what annoys me, I would write down my story, like some of the things that I've been through, and it would make me feel so much better. I know that would help somebody else because I'm saying how I get through it. But my dad, for example, was always like, why are you sharing such personal stuff? And I'm like, because you don't know who it's going to impact. You know, again, with my Joel blog, it's very much about my relationship with my own father. And I have people even today messaging me saying, this touched me in a way that I can't explain. And it just explains my relationship so well. And again, with like my anxiety stuff and depression, I've written about all of this and put it on a blog, and people have read it and said they got emotion out of it and they understood what I've gone through. So yeah, I feel like even just sharing your story is enough to help yourself and help other people.
Yeah, I'm in high agreement. I mean, that's why I wanted to start this thing, because I feel like even though mental health has progressed a lot, I mean, even since I was a kid, there's still a long ways to go. And I think part of the blockage there is the fact that a lot of us are still too scared to share our stories. And I mean, not just like the general aspect of it, but I mean like the nitty-gritty bits that need to be talked about. Kind of like what you mentioned, like with your cutting and the suicidal ideation you had. I mean, these are tough topics for sure, and they can be triggering, but I'm very much under the mindset that, hey, but if we don't talk about it, if we don't in a way normalize it, how are we going to be able to help people? How are we going to make it okay that people can go and get the help that they need?
Yeah, I remember at school as well, like I'd been having these anxiety problems, and I think at the time I didn't know what it was. It was just very much, I was a very nervous kid, very frightened of other people. And I remember telling my guidance counselor about me being bullied, and they'd obviously do their like confrontation with the bully, but then the bully would tell all their friends that I'd reported them, and then it would just get 10 times worse. And I'm kind of like to the guidance counselor, well, why did you do that? Could you not find a better way to do this? Like, I know there's not really a lot of roads you can go down with it, but I think bullies are assholes and they're smart, and they'll find ways for little friends and minions to join in on the bullying parade.
In your experience, when it comes to bullying and mental health, like, do you think that if you hadn't been bullied, that your mental health would have still gone the way it went, like with your journey thus far? Or do you think that no matter what, it was going to be a tough, road to go down?
I mean, when the bullying got worse, my mom and dad also separated as well, which was also not very good for me. But honestly, I guess if I was never bullied, my life would be a lot easier. Like if I was just accepted. And again, with my dyspraxia and being on the autistic spectrum, I didn't know about any of this until I was about 16. So, and I think when I heard about that, it made more sense to me, like why I was so sensitive and why I've always been quite different, like wanting to play by myself and not interact with other children. And oh God, sensory overloads are the worst. I can't. I've been having them recently because I can't even they're not even. It's not even like an anxiety thing. It's just like somebody could be talking and I'm like, oh, like I'd want to hold my head and scream. Like it's oh.
Yeah, you're just like, humans, stop it! Ah,
they're awful. But again, like we're laughing about it, but I think that's because we've been through the mill and it's kind of like, oh fuck it, it's just that bad. And I think that's how I know I'm getting a bit better. I can actually laugh at the situation and not be completely traumatized by it. So, again, my heart goes out to anybody who's like just discovering these issues and going for and not knowing what to do. Like, oh, I can't tell you when I first had my first anxiety attack. It's just it's just a weird feeling. And like I think especially your first panic attack, it feels like your heart's kind of beating at 100 miles an hour. You feel like your chest is tightening. You think you're gonna die, and it's and you're like, whoa, like what is this? I'm fine. But then it's like you're not fine. You're not fine at all. But that's it's a lot.
Yeah, it's it's like your body is stuck in that fight or flight response and you don't know what the hell to do because you're like,
Yeah.
okay, there's no like saber-toothed tiger or anything coming to kill me and my family because that monkey brain is going like, oh God, I gotta run. Or wait, or do I
Yeah,
just stay and accept it?
yeah, and I think that's the reaction I've always had. Like when, again, with my triggers, if somebody could literally say boo in my ear and I'll jump and I'll get freaked out. And that's one of the things I get bullied for. Like I would just overreact over this, but it's just something that I can't help personally. And I remember at one point I just started crying, but I think that's because I did have a sensory overload. Like I just couldn't handle what was happening to me, like the noises and the, oh, it was just horrible. And I remember crying, and I remember the bully laughing at me for crying, and I was like, you don't understand what's going on in my head right now. So yeah.
Well, I feel for you about having to go through stuff like that. I mean, in a way I can relate because recently my brother, my nephew, and we all got diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. And just looking back on our childhoods and some of the bullying that we encountered and our
Yeah,
reactions to it, it's like that
it makes
explains so much.
absolutely,
So
like
much.
even now with my sensory things that are happening, and like looking back on some of the ways that I do react, I'm starting to think that I'm more on the autistic spectrum than I actually think I am. So I'm thinking about seeing a doctor, but then again, when I tell people, they're like, oh, but you're fine, you don't seem to be like autistic or on the spectrum or whatever. And I'm like, well, I already kind of am. Again, if I tell people that I'm dyspraxic and on the spectrum, I think people are like, that doesn't make any sense. Where I'm like, well, dyspraxia and autism kind of goes hand in hand slightly. So yeah, and again, looking back at my childhood, and like I looked up child autism, like their symptoms, and oh my god, like the amount of stuff I've read, and I've been like, that was me. In a nutshell, that was me, and I never saw anything into it until now. And like even now, looking at autism in adults, I'm seeing similarities, and it's crazy. So yeah, I don't think it'd be completely crazy to go to a doctor about it, but it's still very much like, will it feel different for me going? Like, well, I don't want to be treated any differently.
Right.
But will I feel more at ease for knowing that I am? Like,
Okay.
I don't know.
It's like if you can put a name to the enemy, you have a much better chance of fighting it, knowing what you're getting involved with,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being in the dark and just kind of trying to dodge it where you can, right?
Yeah, I was very much like that when I found out about my dyspraxia, because like I'd fall over all the time and I'd struggle to tie my laces, and I struggle with big movements, and again with my sensitivity, it's all that kind of stuff. But when I find out that's what it was and I looked up on it, I was like, that makes so much sense. So yeah, I think that is what's going to help me. And I think, I know Googling your symptoms is not the best thing to do, but I think in some cases, like, yeah, why not?
Yeah, but I
Like,
mean,
hey, don't believe like you're dying. Don't
yeah,
like read
exactly.
something and be like, no, it's not that one. It's not that one.
Yeah, that's something that is amazing that we have nowadays, that we can actually kind of Google our symptoms and maybe get a rough idea of possibly what we have. Because
Yeah,
I do see the merits of being able to do that, especially like, I mean, over here in the US, hardly anybody can afford healthcare. So you're kind of at
absolutely.
your wits' end trying to figure out like what you have, especially if you have mental health problems and you know it and you can't identify it. But I guess something that I would ask you, but I'm curious about is before you got diagnosed and all that, did you find yourself going online to try to figure out what you had before?
Oh, absolutely. Like I would be looking at like, why am I so scared to go outside? Why am I getting so affected by bullies? Why am I crying all the time? Why am I shaking? Why am I wanting to hide all the time? And I looked it up, and I don't think I actually properly looked it up, but I kind of like asked around, like, what does this mean? Am I normal? But then I think it's also through television and things when I started to understand. I remember I must have been about 11, And it was a Demi Lovato documentary that I watched. And she went through things like self-harm and things like that, and anxiety and eating disorders and stuff like that. And I remember watching it going, I felt like this. Like, this is how I felt the whole way. And it just made me understand. And then that's what made me think, right, okay, so maybe the way I'm feeling might mean something, and maybe I can do something about it. So that's when I started to go and see doctors and see counselors and things like that, and just try and take it one step at a time.
Yeah, that's very relatable because around the time that I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I found out that Lady Gaga has the same
Yeah.
condition as me.
Mhm.
So being able to see like, oh my God, this person that has more social power and also, monetary power, that kicks ass, right? She's still
Absolutely.
kicking ass even with it, but just the fact that, wow, there's somebody up there that has the same thing as me. I think I know for me, it definitely humanized like my condition and what I was going through because I went through like several doctors and a lot of them, they don't even take it seriously. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I can only imagine what it was like for you when you found out about Demi Lovato, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It
like
was
how'd you feel?
yeah, it was kind of like, if somebody of that status can go through something like that, like, it's just, you don't feel so alone. And like, obviously I don't know Demi Lovato, I don't go over to her house every day, like I don't know her personally, but like, she was my inspiration in childhood. Like, I watched Camp Rock religiously. But yeah, she was somebody that I loved, and then hearing that she went through similar stuff that I went through, I was like, this makes so much sense. And somebody that big can go through something like that. It's awful, but I'm not alone. And if she's got something like that, how many other people have got stuff like this? You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. I also found out recently that Daniel Radcliffe has dyspraxia. And I was like, oh my God, Harry Potter can't tie his shoelaces like me. Like, it's just weird. Like, just little things that we're noticing about celebrities, like, or we find out about celebrities and we're like, oh, so this isn't so weird and anything that we should be weirded out by. It's just a normal, not a nice normal, but it's a normal piece of life, I guess.
Yeah, kind of like it just normalizes it more. That way more people are accepting of
Yeah,
it. And
absolutely.
hopefully there can be societal adaptations to make it easier for people like us.
Mhm.
So kind of going from that, something that popped into my head, especially when you mentioned your parents, there's a lot of people out there that have undiagnosed mental health problems or they have been diagnosed and their families know about it.
Mhm.
Um, how did your family react to the news, if you don't mind me asking?
Um, my mum was very sympathetic. I've always had a really close relationship with my mum. But my dad, I think he struggles to kind of understand. I think he's very much at the fact, if it's not physical, it doesn't really matter as much. Um, he's kind of like, oh, chin up, get on with it. You know what I mean? Like, that's always been his attitude. And that's always been his attitude. I think that's one of the reasons why my relationship with him isn't brilliant. But I think that's mainly because my mom's always so like, oh my God, you're going to be okay. We're going to help you. We're going to do everything. And then my dad's the complete opposite. So it's kind of, it is quite hard. But I think that's because the way he's been raised as well. Like, his dad is quite harsh on him. Like, he was very much, get on with it. Just, this has happened, so what? Go on, just do what you need to do. And then he went to the Navy and worked for the Navy since he was about like 16 onwards. And he did his full service or whatever he needed to do. And he was obviously toughened up there. And I guess I think now I'm starting to understand my dad more. Like, I'm at his house now, and like, I'm talking to him more, and I think he's understanding why I can feel quite upset when he says certain things. And it's good to see that now. But at the time when I was kind of just growing up with it, with all these issues, I was always like, why don't you listen to me? Why don't you understand what I'm going through? This is a real thing. I'm not making it up. So yeah.
Yeah, sounds
And
like
again, with my thing with Joel, A fictional freaking character. He says this thing that I think he's a tough love guy, and I respond to tough love. I think if somebody's just like, you feel like this and it's horrible, but you've got to get through it and blah blah blah. Like, I think if somebody says it like that to me, like, they're understanding the situation, but they also understand that we have to move on. I like that kind of mentality, but at the same time, I like that having around the corner, you've got this, you can do it, you've got this, kiddo. Like, I love that. And that's why I love Joel so much. And like, knowing that Troy Baker was like the loveliest guy ever and gives the best hugs and the best talks and is so open about mental health as well. That's why I love that character so much, and why I can sit and play The Last of Us and just be like, yeah, I feel at home. I feel like I'm with my father figure that I've always wanted. So, although he kills a lot of things and is very violent, he's the father figure that I needed.
So leading into that too, because you were really young when you got diagnosed, correct?
I must have been about 14 or something.
Yeah.
I think 11 onwards was 11's when I started high school, but that's when the bullying got worse. So that's when my anxiety started to like up, and I'd understand what it was. But it wasn't until about 14 I got diagnosed.
So
and it wasn't until I was about 17 I was diagnosed with depression.
Oh, gotcha. So something that I am interested to ask you is that I know being a mentor to kids and having, I had a teaching profession before the pandemic. There's still a lot of stigmas about kids getting diagnosed at young ages, like 11, 12, 13, 14, right? But according to, at least from what I've heard, when it comes to mental health, a lot of psychologists say usually around the teens is when a lot of these symptoms begin to really emerge. But there's still that stigma that parents have where they just don't want to admit that their kid has something wrong, with them.
Yeah.
So how would you, or what advice would you give to a kid in that situation, going through what you've been through?
I guess if you think that if your feelings aren't normal, speak to somebody, speak to your parents, and even if they're like, oh, I'm not sure about it, try and convince them for you to see somebody. Because again, those emotions aren't normal. And I think before I went to my doctor about it, I tried like my own little coping things. Like I'd blast music in my ears, like of bands I really like, and all their songs would be in my head. So when I'm getting bullied, I wouldn't be focusing on the bullying, I'd be focusing on the music. And I don't really have a lot of advice for that, but I just don't let anybody say that your emotions are invalid and that they're not worth seeing somebody about or getting help. Because again, what you said with God, I've lost myself already.
It's okay.
But again, what you said, like, I think when you hear like what you've got is actually a thing, I think that does really help you, because you're like, okay, so what I'm feeling is normal and it's not unheard of. And again, with schools being the way they are and bullies being the way they are, it's not uncommon. Like, there's going to be people suffering from anxiety everywhere in schools. Even bullies probably suffer from it, because people say that people bully because they've either been bullied themselves or they've got a difficult home life. My recommendation is don't go down that road, because you don't want to be an asshole, because that's probably make you feel worse. Like, no, don't be an asshole. That's my advice. Do not be an asshole.
Hey, that's some pretty solid advice.
Again, yeah, absolutely. Treat others the way that you'd want to be treated. Again, like if somebody smiles at you and says hi, smile and say hi back. Or if somebody's looking low, you go, hi, okay? And like, just be friendly, be nice. And I've gotten to a point, not that I can like tell if people's having problems, but I can see when people don't seem happy. And like, if I see my colleague looking a bit down, I'm like, are you okay? And then even just asking if somebody's okay, that's what they need. I think if you're just asked if you're all right, even if you're saying, oh, I'm fine, and then they're saying, no, I know you're not, do you need to talk? That's what you need to hear. That's what you need. Like, because that's your first indication that you can talk, you can express your feelings, you can talk about what's happened or what's been going on in your head. I don't know.
That's
the
good.
way I see that. I always like it. I always like it if people ask if I'm all right. Because I always do that with other people as well. If I see that, if somebody's tweeting out, oh, I'm having a really bad day, I'd just be like, you know, if you need someone to speak to, I'm here. Like, I think it's just what people do need, genuinely. I hate people seeing them down. Because again, I've been there, and I'm not saying I'm cured. I definitely still suffer from all these things, but you know, just knowing that you can help another person makes a great difference.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, that's a very hard thing to do, is to approach somebody and ask them if they're okay, because there's always that fear in the back of their head of like, oh no, what if they get mad at me for asking, or what if
Oh yeah,
something
absolutely.
bad
Even if
happens?
they do, like, at least in the back of your head, you're kind of like, well, you know, at least I've tried. I remember one of my colleagues was really upset and she was crying. And I was like, are you okay? And I walked up to her and I held her. I was like, are you okay? And she just like marched back, like, no, I'm not. Like, she just kind of ran away. And by that point, I was like, I've asked her, but I don't want to poke the bear anymore because I'm just gonna pull up, and I don't need her to get any more upset. So, but yeah, if you see somebody upset, just ask them if they're okay. And even if they said that they are, just poke a little bit, kind of just be a bit like, I know you're not, I can see it on your face.
I love the comparison that you have, kind of just poking the bear a little bit when it's trying to hibernate.
Absolutely. I think we all get in that state where we're kind of like, we do retreat into ourselves, and that's when we're bottling stuff in. And that's it. If you don't talk to somebody, that's it. It's going to be bottled and bottled and bottled. And it's more that yourself that triggers it off, not somebody else, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
Like, if somebody asked me if I had all this stuff wrong with me in my head, and then they're going, are you okay? I'd be a bit like, I think so. And then you'd think about it and you're like, wait, I'm not okay. And that's when you can talk. Whereas if you're bottling all this up, and then somebody could say something so minor and all of a sudden you blow up like and you're depressed for however long, and like, I hate bottling. I hate it, but I still do it. I don't stop myself. I still do it. I'm still very guilty of it.
So a thing I wanted to ask in relation to that, I mean, we talked about how you can approach somebody, you know, and ask them if they're okay. Have you ever had an instance of where you personally wanted to talk to somebody, and that person that you wanted to talk to about, you know, what was going on with you, they weren't available for whatever reason? Like, how do you deal with that? Because I know for some people, they immediately shut down and get frustrated and they retreat and they end up bottling those feelings. So have you ever had a experience like that before?
I think again, with even celebrities, like, or I say celebrities, like we could see, like Troy, we have a kind of relationship with him. If we see him kind of not feeling right, I think a part of us is always like, oh, are you okay? And like, you could tell that he's not. I think Troy is very obvious when he's not feeling right. And
it's his ears. I notice it's like when he's upset, I notice this, and I'm gonna sound really fucking weird for like a couple seconds, but I notice this when he's upset or angry, the tips of his ears turn like this pink color.
Oh, really?
I'm like, oh, okay, something's buzzing. All right.
I'm gonna look for that now. Every live stream, I'm just gonna be looking at it like, under a microscope.
Yeah. Sorry, Troy. I didn't mean to throw you under a bus like that. It's just a little thing that I noticed.
Yeah, wherever we are. But again, I'm one of those people that, like, even if it's a celebrity or somebody of like higher status, I would message them to see if they're okay. I'm like, oh, hi, I saw your live stream. So you look not very happy. Are you okay? But then again, I think with Troy as well, because he's a busybody, he would like click on the message and not say that it's red when it's not been. And I'm kind of like, oh shit, because I've asked this simple question. Like, But I also overthink about that as well. But I think I've gotten to the point now where people just kind of like tap on the messages without realizing, and then kind of get on with their lives. I'm sitting here like, why have you read it and not responded? Have I said something wrong by asking if you're okay?
So does this go with friends too, besides celebrities? Like, have you ever had moments?
Absolutely. I think if somebody tweeted out that they're not okay or they're just going for a bad day, and I tweet them if they're all right, I think that, and they don't respond, I think that part of me is like really worried. Like, I'm like, what's happening right now? Are they either, I'm like, okay, they're fine, they're just busy and trying to get on with it, or my top of my mind's like, are they in a ditch somewhere? Like, it could be 0 to 100. And I think it's worse the longer it goes on, like the longer they're not speaking to you. And that's, please try and message your friends if they message you if you're okay, because we're worried worse. Absolutely, we all worry.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like, especially if you have a big heart and you're empathetic, it's like,
oh, totally.
It's like, I'm really concerned about you, friend.
I mean, I don't know if I'm an empath, but I'm definitely empathetic. I'm very like, if somebody's sad, I feel really sad. If somebody's angry, I'm like, I don't know why you're angry, but I'll feel your anger. I'll be raging with you.
It's like, I might not be able to solve your problems, but let's get pissed. Let's just get mad.
Let's feel this emotion. We'll share it. You're not holding this.
All right, so we're coming down towards the end, and
Cool.
I wanted to say that, first of all, thank you for taking the leap with me and doing this, being the first one to get interviewed, and just going with the flow of everything. And also, too, you have such a big, compassionate heart, Kay, and
thank you.
I hope that your story and the experiences you've been through resonate with people, and they're able to find the good again in their lives. So thank you for doing this and being so open and vulnerable and just sharing a piece of yourself with others. So
Absolutely.
So the last thing I have to say is, like, is there a final thing you want to say to people that are listening?
Again, by the way, I'm not crying. I've literally got like a snot bubble. Just nice topic. But again, if you're going for like an emotion, if you're going through like this really bad time, again, write it down, or don't be afraid to tell somebody. If you know somebody that's gone through like similar feelings as you, just tell them. I think, because I could say to somebody, when I don't understand my feelings, I could say, well, I know this person has had these issues, so I can just go, hi, I don't really know what I'm feeling, but I know that you've felt this. Is there any way that you can help me, or tell me what's wrong with me? I know you're not a doctor, but just tell me a little bit like how you're feeling and how this helps you. So don't be afraid to ask, even if it's just a friend or somebody that you really trust. Or again, Samaritans is always a good place to go, I think, just for an ear to listen to you, because you could just ramble about anything and Samaritans would be like, oh yes, I understand. And just, they don't even say a lot. It's kind of just like they get you talking, and that's the main thing. And just talk to somebody, reach out, and if somebody's opening up to you, open up your heart as well, and that'll really help you, I think.
Powerful words, man.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's going to conclude the first podcast of Peer-to-Peer Journeys. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you soon. All right. Bye, guys.